Are we
Jesse.
on? Good morning.
I see you.
Hello, I see you too. All right, we're on. Good
very,
morning
very
and
cool.
welcome to Orion Online. It is so good to be here today.
It's super good to be here.
It's rainy.
It is. How was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, my, beautiful. It was really chill. How about
Really?
yours?
Mine was pretty chill as
Good
well.
food, good family.
How was everybody's Thanksgiving at home out there? Did you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving?
Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Hey guys, we are in our last week of our Tables series, and we are thrilled you're with us. Craig McGlasson's bringing the fire today.
He's going to bring a fire. He's going to close out the series.
He
It's going to be so good.
And we are doing communion during service today. So Jesse, how can people at home participate with us?
Whatever is common to your house. Jesus used bread and wine because that was common to the day. So whatever you have at home.
I
Doritos.
like that.
Do you have Doritos at home?
Doritos.
Maybe Mountain Dew.
Maybe you have small children and there's Cheerios in
Or
the couch.
just juice and some Cheerios. That'll work.
That'll work.
Whatever represents
but
that.
really, we would love for you to be a part of that moment with us at home. So grab what you have. Be prepared for that. It'll be at the end of the service.
Yeah.
And we are so glad you're with us. Hope you're still celebrating this month of gratitude.
Absolutely. It's going to be so good. But yeah, if you need anything, put prayer. If you need prayer in the comments, we'd love to pray for you. Be
Yep.
there for you. So whatever you guys need, we're there.
All right. Have an awesome time,
right.
guys. Enjoy the service.
Enjoy.
We're
We'll
getting
see you
rolling
later.
in a minute.
see you back there. All right, hey, good morning. Welcome. Glad you guys are here. You guys can have a seat. Super pumped that you guys are with us today. Do we have any Ohio State fans in the room? Ba-dun-dun-dun. We got any Michigan fans in the room? Come on, man. Come on, man. Yesterday, y'all were worshiping yesterday, weren't you? Yeah, that's right. Okay, all right. Well, hey, we're super glad you're here, whether you're an Ohio State fan or a Michigan fan. Well, we're a little more glad if you're a Michigan fan, but super stoked you guys are here with us today. Listen, last weekend was an awesome time here at our Orion campus. We had our Thanksgiving basket distribution. And so how many of you were able to be here and be a part of that last weekend? Yes, it was absolutely incredible. We have some pictures to show of kind of how the day went, how we assembled the things, and then we rallied together and then distributed them and dispersed out throughout the community. But listen, I do want to make you aware that we are still receiving donations for this, because oftentimes our post-Thanksgiving gifts are what sort of fund for the next year. They set us up for the next year. So if you would like to continue to support and be part of the Thanksgiving baskets, if you're like, oh man, I missed it, but I really wanted to be a part of that, you can still be a part of that. You can click the QR code and go ahead and get us ready and get us going for next year as well. And then, so that was Saturday. And then we came together on Sunday and we had an awesome gathering here at the Orion campus, and we celebrated baptisms. And it was such a powerful morning. So many of our faith community were able to get baptized. I mean, you can see me in the background just cheesing in most of these pictures. I'm just like, gee, 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 gee. It's just so powerful when people share their stories and you see little kids that are like, yeah, I want to follow Jesus and I want to be public about this and I want to stand in front of a room full of people and say, I love Jesus and I'm all in. And so it was such a powerful week to be a part of. And so we just want to celebrate that. And if you missed it, man, you got to be here because it was absolutely incredible. The energy in the room was awesome. So that was last weekend. Last weekend, we got a lot going on. Now this coming weekend, we have a lot going on as well. On December 3rd, if you are a lady in the room, we have our women's brunch coming up, our women's Advent brunch. It's on Saturday from 11 to 1. It's $10 a person. We have these like sponsored tables, and it's going to be like real china, right? When's the last time you went out somewhere and ate with like real dinnerware in China? I'm not talking Chinette, like the high quality paper plates. I'm talking actual china. It's going to be so cool. They're decorating the tables and all that. And so if you'd like to be a part of this, you can still register, kensingtonchurch.org/Orion brunch. So that's this coming Saturday. Now, this coming Tuesday, we're launching our 1829 here at the Orion campus. If you don't know what that is, it's super exciting. Kensington has a ministry, a gathering for people who are 18 years old to 29 years old. We've met historically at the Troy location only, but we are now branching out and launching one here at the Orion campus on Tuesday nights. It's going to be absolutely incredible. You sit around tables, you eat food, you have discussion topics, and it's a great way to get plugged into community with your own age group. And so if you want to be a part of that, it is launching December 6th. Drew Daniels will be there leading it. He'll be in the lobby after service with some stuff. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, go to the hub, get plugged in. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And then the very next night, oh my gosh, Sam, there's more? Yes, there's more. We are doing our tree lighting service, our midweek. It's going to be Wednesday, December 7th. Dinner is at 6, and then the tree lighting will be at 7, the service and everything. It's going to be awesome. We're going to be out in the lobby. We're going to be in here. We're going to be out in our green space lighting the tree. It's going to be fun for the entire family, and so we would love for you to mark your calendars and join us. We're going to sing some Christmas carols. It's going to be great. You can register at kensingtonchurch.org/tree lighting, or you can take a picture of that QR code, man. We got a lot going on here at the Orion campus. And listen, Sunday morning is just part of what we do. All this stuff we're talking about, this is where you experience community. This is where you build relationships. This is how you begin to do life with one another. And so we take a segment during the gathering on Sunday just to say, hey, you should come hang out with us. Hey, you should come do some of these things with us, because we really think it can radically impact and change your life, okay? So make sure you mark your calendar for all these things. Now, I'm going to invite Craig up here for a moment. This is the 1-year sort of weekend anniversary for the tragedy that happened to our neighboring community in Oxford about a year ago. So I figure
Yeah, thanks. So a lot of you have reached out over the last number of weeks, just knowing that this day was coming. This Wednesday, the 30th, is the 1-year anniversary. Seems like such a weird word to say, but the 1 year since it all happened. And so a number of you have asked, are we going to do something? Are we going to gather? Should we have a night of prayer? And we talked about that. We thought about that. There's a collective of pastors and even school administration that have been in a lot of conversations over the last number of weeks. And one of the things that's actually being discouraged is large gatherings to remember the moment or to stand together in solidarity. But we are going to try to remember it together, even though we won't all be together. So here's what we're going to do. This Wednesday, the 30th, at 7 o'clock, we're asking that you would put a luminary, so bag and a light, for any of you that are like, what's a luminary? Luminary on your front lawn, just as a way for us to all remember, and again, to kind of be in solidarity. So wherever you're at, Oxford, Orion, if you're on my side of town over in Sterling Heights, wherever you are, we're just asking it together we would do this. So you can do a couple things. Obviously, you can make your own. Doesn't take a lot of creativity. A bag and a candle gets it done. But we also have several of these right here in the building that you can go out to the hub and you can pick up. So I think we should have enough for most of us between the two services. But if we do happen to run out, again, feel free to just make your own. But this Wednesday at 7 o'clock on your front lawn, we're asking if people would just put these out and just spend a minute really in prayer. Some of mine and Nicole's friends that we've been developing here since we've been at Orion work in the school system. And so I feel like we get to have conversations maybe more often than we otherwise would, just about the way that it's still just as thick, just as present, just as painful to lead through for families, for the community, for first responders, for school administration. So we just don't want to be a community that lets that year pass us by because it didn't directly happen to us, and still instead stand with those who are impacted and affected and continue to be at this point. So here's what I'd love to do just for a brief minute, is just have us share a moment of silence. And I always wonder myself, like when you do a moment of silence, like what are you supposed to do? What's the purpose of the silence? For me, the purpose of a moment of silence, it's to put my emotions and to put my thoughts back into the presence of a situation that I need to be mindful of and not forget. But I think for those of us that also believe that Jesus is Lord over all things, it's a moment to acknowledge him. It's a moment to ask him to continue to move into the situation. It's a moment to ask him to move into all of our schools. The school my girls go to had a threat just a couple of weeks ago that was a bit of a scare. I know it rattled a lot of those students, and I know that's happening everywhere still. So it's a moment to pray for Oxford and for those families, but also a moment to pray for our teens, for students, and for just such an attacked culture of teenagers right now in our world. So can we do that? Moment of silence, and then I'll bring it to a close and pray for us in just a second. Father, I'm thinking of the words in John that say that of Jesus, he is the light of the world, and in him there is no darkness. And yet we know that there is still a presence of darkness in our world. And God, I pray that wherever there is darkness, you would push it back through your people, which I believe is your intended plan, is that we, your people, would be your son in this world, and in doing so would work to drive back all places of darkness. So God, I pray for the families that are still grieving and will for years and years to come, for communities that are still wrestling and grieving, for first responders that are still dealing with images and emotions. God, I pray that you would, especially as we go into the holidays and it brings to kind of a peak level all of these emotions of times that people should be at tables that they're not. God, in all of that, would you enter in? Would your church enter in? Would we as your people enter in? Would your Holy Spirit descend in a way that is what your scriptures say is a peace that has no way to be understood other than God, other than you. It just passes our understanding. And God, I pray that especially as we move into Christmas this year, let us not just be people that go through, particularly in the church, but go through religious motions, but we would seriously give weight and acknowledgement to the fact that you, God, came, walked on this earth. You stood among us. You died for us. You rose again. and that no matter what this world throws at us, there is hope, there is life, there is light in the person of Jesus Christ. And so I pray that this Wednesday, God, that thousands of prayers would go up, that people that are still in grief and suffering would feel the support, even if they don't know how to name it or explain it, but would feel the support of your comfort, your care brought on by your people as we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Craig, for leading us through that. As we continue to move forward through the day, man, it's tough with all the things going on in the world, like the most recent in Colorado and at Walmart and all the things. Man, we can't underestimate the power of prayer. We can't underestimate and undervalue the power of prayer. And so like Craig said, if we can continue in prayer moving forward, that would be really, really, really awesome. So as we move forward with the day, I want to introduce you to a person named Tamika, who is part of our faith community. She typically attends the 11 o'clock service, but we're going to see a bit of her story this morning and how God has called her and challenged her to step into some areas that she stepped into, and we're going to see sort of the massive impact that that's had. And so go ahead and check out this video.
When we look at inner city schools, they're usually lacking in adequate reading materials. They don't even have books. We always find ourselves always trying to get the same level or quality of education as the suburban schools. And so when you look at opportunities in places like Flint, Michigan, or Pontiac, when you don't see anything different, you just feel like you just sucked into the world that's around you. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. Parents were teenagers when they had me. We lived in, inner city neighborhoods, getting kicked out of houses and getting kicked out of apartments, and just having that instability of where we're going to live and how we're going to get around. I remember we finally got one real car, and it got repossessed in less than 6 months because they couldn't afford the payments. Ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a doctor. Went off to college, and I started my career path to pursue medicine. I took a class called Careers in Health my senior year, and that's when I found out about physician assistant, nurse practitioner, and I was like, oh, I can go that route, so I went that route. So I graduated with my pre-med degree and then went to Wayne State. They had a second degree program. So then I did that. I was only supposed to work 1 year as a nurse, but my husband wanted to get his master's first. So after he finished, then I went back to grad school and got my degree for adult primary care nurse practitioner. So about 10 years ago, I started another program called GEO. We went around to local inner city high schools and we recruited high school students and we took them on college excursions, I call it. But I remember during that time, I went up to Pontiac High School and I took them a flyer. I remember they looked at it and it was like, our kids, they wouldn't be interested in this. And I was just like, wow, you didn't even ask them, but okay, so it was that. So I thought that was kind of weird. And so I started doing some research and I just noticed that with Pontiac High School, with the proficiency scores in regards to math and reading, it was terrible. It was 0% were proficient in math and less than 10% were proficient in reading. And so now I'm going back to that little girl, Tamika, who was in the inner city, and knowing that education was one of the main things that can get us out and transform our narrative and our future generations to come. And so I was like, wow, I reached out to school partners at Kensington. And I was like, Julie, what about the high school? Are we doing anything in the high school? And she said, Tamika, why don't you just go start something at the high school? I said, sign me up. Sounds like a winner.
Ma'am, I need your pencil.
Why?
I need your pencil.
You're supposed to have some dialogue.
I found out he got a brother.
I need a pencil. Okay, well then we might.
So Imagine is an after-school program at Pontiac High School, and our vision is to bring an end to generational poverty. And our mission on how we do that, we transform the way the students view themselves, the way they view education, and the way they view the world around them. So what a typical day looks like. We meet on Mondays after school from 2:30 to 5 p.m. We feed them, and then usually at 2:45, we actually start the tutoring time. And we do math drills to build up those muscles. And then I am statements is just, we believe the power of life and death is in the tongue. So it's getting them to speak different, to believe something different. So they say things like, I am created to do good. I am brilliant. I am amazing. I am loved. I am accepted.
I am made in the image and likeness of God. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am brilliant. I am created to do good. I am accepted. I am loved. I am destined for greatness.
And then we get into our large group. This past week, we talked about identity, talked about the power of education.
So don't let whatever your circumstances are hold you back, make you feel like you can't do it, make you feel like it's not worth it, make you feel like it's too hard, because that's not the case.
But it's just great to see them come alive. I mean, these students are coming alive. So Faith is a young lady. She was a senior last year. I said, Faith, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she was just like, well, I want to be a nurse. I said, well, you should do it. And she was like, have you seen my grades? She was like, nah, I'm not going to be able to do it.
When I started high school, you need 22 credits to graduate from Pontiac High. I had 12 and a half. So I had to make up 10 credits by May. Not only did I have to make up 10 credits, I had to keep up with my core classes as well. So my head, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna graduate. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna graduate. But then you had Tamika like, Nurse Faith, you got it. You had Wendy like, you're so smart, you got it.
And eventually she just started like believing like nothing's impossible. She got to the end, she was like, Miss Tamika, I'm not gonna stop at my bachelor's degree. I'm gonna go and get my PhD. I'm gonna be just like you. I'm gonna have my own practice. I'm gonna do this and that. And I was like, let's do it. And I was like, come on.
All year, I'm like, I'm missing this amount of credits. I'm not ready yet. I'm not there. My grades are already bad. So when the lady called me into the office and was like, here's your cap and gown, I'm like, wait, like what? Like, here's my what, huh? Like, she gave it to me and all I could do was sit there and I almost cried in her face. Like, I'm like, I really did it. And the first person I called, Tamika. Tamika was so happy. Oh my God, Nurse Faith, you did it! Like, that made me feel good because I'm like, they helped me, now they proud of me, so I have to make sure that they continue to be proud of me because Tamika believed in me when nobody else did. It was Nurse Faith all year. And she still don't stop calling me that, so I like that.
We went to Oakland University for a tour, and the lady at Oakland University, the connection there, she really gravitated towards Faith, because Faith was just asking a lot of questions. She was really interested. And so she the one told Faith about Jackson Community College, because Jackson Community College, they have dorms and all this type of stuff. She can still have that college feel, but be able to bring her grades up.
I applied in July, and I found out maybe a couple of days after I applied, and I was like, whoa. Like, cause my whole thing was I wanted to go away, cause like if I go home, I'm gonna get the staying at home and not want to do what I'm supposed to do. But I'm like, okay, now that I'm not at home, I'm an hour and a half away. I can't just get up and go home. I can't quit even if I wanted to. So it pushes me to just keep going. I don't have a choice.
Hey, Nurse Faith. Hey. How you doing?
I'm here.
You're so funny. It's so good to see you.
I'm gonna get my associates in nursing here. And then I want to move to Texas and go to Texas Southern to get my bachelor's and my master's in nursing. The fact that I even got here from high school is amazing.
The Bible says with God, nothing's impossible, right? And that's just what I believe. I just believe that if the right person is in your place and around you, then it can bring different things out of you that had you been alone and isolated, couldn't.
I am loved and I am destined for greatness.
I am artistic, I am fun, and I am well-mannered.
These futures are going to be changed forever. Their generations are going to be changed forever.
I am successful.
I am brilliant and I am accepted.
And just having that type of community around you can be one that not only nurtures you, but also cause you to grow and to blossom and to sprout like never before.
I am loved and appreciated by my friends and family. I know that I am fearless.
Then after college, I was gonna go to the military, do my 4 years in the Navy, and live a happy life after that. True.
Tamika's story is overwhelming because she had a vision and she stepped out in courage to share that vision with the next generation and to see the impact in Faith's life and many more as she spoke words of life and identity. It's just so powerful to consider how Tamika's story is just one of many stories happening around Kensington.
And that really is what our Move Out Network is. It's these opportunities to be the hands and feet of Jesus to our local communities. And it is such a privilege just to see the different ways that people are moving beyond the four walls of the church to be able to bring the love and the hope of Jesus to our local communities.
So as you consider a year-end Christmas gift to Kensington, I want to say thank you. You are a part of Tamika's story and many other stories of impact throughout our community, and we're so glad that you consider us a place that you want to partner with. Now, Shauna, quick question. Is it a real Christmas tree or a fake Christmas tree?
Oh, there is only one answer, and that is real, 100%.
I agree. We just picked up ours and cannot wait to celebrate this next season.
Yes, and we hope you have a wonderful Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right, I'm going to ask the room. Justin just asked Shauna. All right, where's my real tree people? Fake tree people? What in the world? I should have stayed at Clinton Township. Jeez. Gonna go cut ours down today, like real people, real tree. So one of the things I love so much about Faith's story is I can actually identify a lot with it. Some of you know this about me. I grew up downriver. High school I went to was River Rouge High School. People weren't expected to become much in River Rouge High School. Just to give you one story of one way that you can maybe understand my school. My sophomore year, our U.S. history teacher, who was like one of the most beloved teachers in the school, disappeared. Was just gone all of a sudden. We show up to class day after day after day. I was like, where did Mr. Honeyfrat go? Come to find out, he was arrested and thrown in prison for gun running. So that was the school I went to, and many other stories like it. I remember one teacher specifically in my freshman year saying to the entire class that she didn't care how we did on any of the tests because none of us were going to go anywhere anyways. So I get some of that story, and for me, it really touches my own story. And so I love what we've been able to do through Move Out. Tamika's heart, her doing what God has given her a passion and a wiring for, stepping in. I mean, that's a big part of what Move Out is. It's not us on an organizational level saying, hey, here's what we're doing. It's saying, no, you do what God has wired you to do, and let us come alongside and support and figure out how to be a champion to it. But you do what God's wired and called and passioned you to do, and that's exactly what Tamika's doing and having a pretty incredible impact. So part of that story and part of that video is because this time of year, if you've been around Kensington for a while, you know this, we like to show moments at the end of the year as we kind of draw to a close of things that God has done and used us as a community to do over the last year and anticipate what he's going to use us to do next year. So just like Justin said, I would support it and echo it. Like, we would love to have you and invite you, ask you, as you're thinking about the year coming to a close, many of you are thinking about where you're going to be generous towards. And I'd love to ask you not just to have us on the list, but put Kensington at the top of that list. And if you think that there are other places, you go, I don't know if Kensington's really getting it done, then give other places, but give to places that the kingdom is being advanced through the work of Jesus' followers. I just happen to believe that God's doing incredible things through you as a result of your generosity. My family, we continue to double down here and all of that. So it's pretty simple. If you want to be a part of it, if you want to give, here's how all of our year end goes. So whether you snap a picture of that or even screenshot the QR code, that'll take you to it. But just want to continue to say thank you and to ask you as we move into the end of the year, just you to ask God how he would maybe move you to help us as a community together be better positioned moving into 2023 to continue to see more stories like Faith's and Tamika's. So let me switch gears now. We're going to jump into the fourth week of the series. I'm going to kind of put us in a mindset to get into the message this morning. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of a time in your life, could be something you're even going through right now, where there was a situation that you were highly anticipating, something that you had been preparing for, working for, and it's beginning to happen. So maybe maybe it's a graduation, maybe it's a marriage, maybe it's a new job, maybe it's wrapping up a chapter or a season of something in your life. But one of those kind of events that takes time, takes preparation, there's a date, you're working towards that date. Or you got something in mind maybe? Okay, now imagine whatever that is. So like for Nicole and I, probably one of those things would be our son getting married this next year. I know once we get on the other side of the holidays, like we're kicking high gear into all of those plans and details. So whatever that is for you, get it in your head. Now imagine that you're only 72 hours away. It's not months, it's not years, it's barely days. You're 72 hours ahead of where you're at, this is gonna happen. At this point, I think it would be reasonable to assume if it's a worthwhile enough, big enough event that's about to occur in 72 hours, it's gonna start taking all of your attention and thoughts. Not only is it capturing all of your attention and thoughts, like everything else is beginning to decrease in importance and priority for you. Like if you're 3 days away from having a baby, you're not thinking about the people you haven't had over recently and starting to make plans of when you're gonna get together. You're not thinking about them at all. Who are you thinking about? You. Right. So whatever's about to happen, now you're kind of getting tunnel vision and it's all you're thinking about. So now picture this. Whatever it is, it's not a good thing. It's going to be the most painful, the most humiliating, and the most difficult thing you've ever gone through, and it's 72 hours away and you know it. And you also know at the end of it, you will not survive it. What's your attention like now? What's your focus? Because this is exactly the story we're going to look at for a minute with Jesus. 72 hours away from the cross, where nobody would have blamed him if all of his focus, had they understood the weight of the moment and what was to come, nobody would have blamed him if all of his focus was here, if it was to exclude everyone else around him. Or even if his focus was to assume, you all need to take care of me right now because I'm the one that's about to go to the cross, and yet he has an entirely different response than that. John chapter 13, I just want to show you one verse of the text that we're going to be in this morning, and then we're going to pray. John 13, verse 1 says this. It was just before the Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. And having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the, everybody just say the last word, because that's going to have importance in a minute. He loved them to the end. This is 72 hours from the cross. He's fully aware of it. And what he chooses to do in this moment is put zero focus on himself and all the focus on the people around him. And everything that happens as a result of that, I believe, is supposed to be everything that happens in this gathering that we call the church. So let me pray. Father in heaven, who's also here, who's everywhere, who isn't just everywhere, everywhere is with you. Paul said it, that you hold everything in the palm of your hand, you sustain everything, and so you're not just everywhere, everywhere is with you. And so God, I pray that because of that reality, you would penetrate this morning in a way that would get to our hearts and our minds, would get to our logic and our emotions, in a way that would continue to compel us forward towards your Son. And I pray, Father, that we wouldn't emotionally just go through religious motions this morning, even if we wouldn't consider ourselves followers of yours or religious people by any means. I pray that still, God, somehow you would get hold of us in a way as to invite us into yourself in a deeper way of knowing you, knowing your love for us, knowing your plans for us. God, I pray especially as I think what you want us to spend time looking at is part of the nature, the culture, the intended ethos of your church, then I pray, God, that you would speak to us about that, because some of us, like myself, we have just been a part of this thing for a long, long time, and it's easy to forget the longer, it's weird, God, but the longer we're in church, it's easy to forget what this is supposed to be about. And so I pray that you would give a freshness to our minds and our hearts, not just about who you are, but who it is that you've called us to be as your followers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so before we go any further, real quick, we are going to take up our offering this morning, and just, man, thank you. I hope these videos are just, it's a great way, especially in December, in November, to just kind of remember, like, yeah, this is what God does when we give and when we open up in generosity. And so thank you. If you're not a part of it on a week-to-week or throughout the year basis, would love to have you join us in this on the screen, all the ways that you can do that. Just appreciate it. There is nothing we do that happens without every single one of you. So Probably a number of you are figuring this out, but if you haven't been a part of this moment, there's buckets that go down the aisle. You just need to, if you're the first aisle that comes to you, just pass it behind you, pass it back down, and set it on the ground, and somebody will grab that and take care of it from there. All right, so let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever been to, I want you to think of a time if this is true for you. You've been to an event that's kind of a big deal event, and there's seating involved in the event, but there's no seating arrangement. There's no designated seats. So the kind of event where you walk in and you know like the seat that you pick is gonna matter, but you're not quite sure what to do. So you walk into the room and you see all the important people, and you're not gonna be that presumptuous to assume you should sit at the most important people table, however you would designate most important people. And then you look and you see the table of people that everyone's wondering how they got the invite, whether it's a wedding, a work thing, whatever it is, right? And you're like, and I'm not sitting there either. And so then you've got somewhere in between, you've got to strategically figure out like, where am I gonna sit that's not presumptuous, but also not humiliating? And I don't know, like been there, right? Those kind of moments, like those are usually big event moments or kind of big event kind of gatherings. You're trying to figure out where is it that I sit. So start in November, there is a gathering of one of our local partners with Kensington called TTI. It's the Timothy Initiative. It is a model of church planning and discipleship based off of a relationship we read about in the Bible between a guy named Timothy and a guy named Paul. And so every year, annually, this gathering happens of all these global leaders around the world, all of our national leaders and support networks. And it usually happens in Florida. It's a lot better to gather in Florida than it is in Michigan in November. And so start in November. My wife and I were there last year, and we thought, dude, this is so incredible just to see the scope of the church around the world and what God is doing, that we wanted our kids to come with us. So this year, just a couple weeks ago, we took our kids with us in November to be at this conference and this gathering. So night one of the gathering happens, and we get there earlier in the day, so we're playing in the ocean, or like, okay, we gotta go get ready. So we get up to our room, everybody does their thing, shower, dress, we're ready to get down to dinner. We've got like 10 minutes to get down there. We're looking at watches, and I'm telling all my kids, all right, guys, we gotta go. We gotta get down there. Let's go. Lots of people, there's lots of things. It's gonna be busy. We gotta get down there right now. And this is one of those kind of things where there's seating, but no designated seating. And so my son, I look at him at one point, and he's laying in his bed in his room. He's just on his phone talking to his fiance. I'm like, hey, dude, it's time to go. Let's go. 5 minutes later, I look in there. He's still, I love you more. He's doing that whole thing. I'm like, get off the phone, dude. We got to go. So then I look at him, and I do this. I go, bro, I cannot be late to get down here. I hate being late. That's a thing for me. Like, I hate being late. So I'm like, we have got to be on time. Like, on time is early. Anybody? Yeah, that's me. So I'm like, we've got to get down there now. So I look at him and I go, all right, dude, if you don't get out of that bed, I'm going to pounce on you in 3, 2, and I get to 2, and he's, for whatever reason, he's spinning his baseball hat on his hand as he's talking. I love you more. And I go 3, 2, and he freaks out and he goes, ah! And he like whips this thing at me. I've never seen a baseball hat fly straighter and faster than this hat. And the bill of it hit me right underneath the eye. Look at this. This is literally what happened within seconds. Yeah. He runs back into his room, shuts the door, because we've got like the shared rooms, door that separates. I'm in the bathroom for 5 minutes holding my eye. I can't even open it. Finally, all that calms down. I go back to go into his room. Door's locked. I go, you need to open the door. He goes, are you gonna kill me? I'm like, if you don't open the door. So he finally opens the door, we go, and I'm like, now we're gonna totally be late. And I'm coming down with a black eye. I'm like, okay, here we go. So we come walking down, and we get there, and I'm already frustrated. We're already walking in late. Almost everybody's gone through the line. And here stands a big deal of the event. Like one of the guys putting on the event, like super big deal of this gathering, stands at the door and greets me and says, oh, I've been waiting for you. I was like, oh, of course you have. And he says, I've got a table for you. And so right away, I'm not just telling you honestly, in my mind, I'm thinking, my kids are gonna see, take note, y'all, take note. And so he walks me in, and I see us walking towards the table with all the big deal people. I'm like, he knows. And we get up there, and he immediately dog legs left and sits me at the table with clearly the non-important people. And I'm like, not only did you not sit me at the important people table, you intentionally waited to bring me in and sit me at the table with the non-important people. I'm like, ugh. And then I'm thinking, it's the eye. Well, it's the black eye, isn't it? Like, but that was my moment. And so my kids, they're like, yeah, Dad, you didn't even get the important person table. I'm like, because you gave me a black eye. I got beat up by my teenage son, that's why. But this is a moment with Jesus where it says he loved them till the end. They're gathered together because the Passover is about to come. This is a big deal gathering and a big deal moment for multiple reasons. Some that the disciples understand and some that they don't. What they understand is it's the celebration of Passover. It is the celebration that has happened for generations of a time in their history where God came through for his people. It's also an anticipation, and this is what the disciples don't get yet, but Jesus does. It's an anticipation of his faithfulness in the future, because 3 days from now, he's going to go to the cross, which will be for all of humanity. They're going to bury him. And then 3 days after that, so 6 days from this moment, he's going to walk out of that tomb. So it's both it's a celebration of what God has done to be faithful, and unbeknownst at this moment to the disciples, what he will do to be faithful to his people. But it's also a big moment because this is the last dinner that they're ever going to have together. There won't be another one like it. This last week, a friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. And I was talking to his wife a couple days ago, and she's going through all of the lasts that she didn't realize were going to be the last time that we had dinner, the last time he sat at the kitchen table, the last time that we went out together. And she's going through all these moments of last. This is a moment of last. Jesus knows it. The disciples don't get it yet, but it's part of what makes this such an important gathering, such an important dinner, is it'll be the last time that he has a moment like this with his disciples. But a huge part of what makes this dinner gathering so important can so easily be lost because it's contained in one word. It's a word I had you say a minute ago. It says in John, as Jesus is kind of centering himself for the moment, that he had loved his disciples and loved them to the end. Now, here's what's interesting. I don't know that any of us necessarily care about the Greek language and Hebrew language of the Bible, but language matters. And sometimes the translation, especially from Greek or Hebrew to English, things get lost because those are two languages that were far more poetic than our English language, which means a lot of times what we use just one word to represent for something, there might be a dozen words that really give a full meaning of what a Greek word or a Hebrew word. So when it says he loved them to the end, this is the Greek word telos, T-E-L-O-S. And it literally carries with it kind of a fuller idea of completion or accomplishment. So what's interesting is that Jesus is literally saying, not just I loved them to the end, but he's saying I loved them to completion. In other words, what he's saying is something about what is going to happen at this table this evening, something that's already happening this evening at this table, is completing a part of what he came to do. Now, what's interesting is if I was to ask you, what did Jesus come to do? Probably most of us at some point in the answer would say to die on the cross and come back to life. Yes. But given that that hasn't happened yet, and he's saying, I have completed something already, there's something more taking place at this table. There's something about part of what he came to accomplish that's actually being finished right now at this table. And I think what it is the establishment, the beginning. This is the birth moment of the church. The disciples didn't get it yet. They don't understand this. But after this evening, everything about the mission of Jesus is going to be put in their hands and entrusted into them. Everything. It's all going over to them. And this is the moment where he begins, I think, before they fully realize it, to model for them, to teach to them, and to draw together them into this thing called the church. Now, again, one more time I'll do this today. Greek word, the church. The church is an interesting word because the actual Greek word that we get church from is ekklesia. And the word ekklesia was not always associated with followers of Jesus or Christians. As a matter of fact, you know the first group of Christians that were given any kind of a designation or a name, you know what they were called? The Way, yeah. They were simply called the Way because Jesus once taught, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but by me. And so they became people of the Way. So this word ekklesia was not originally associated with Christians. Church was not a designation of Jesus followers. You know who it was a designation of? Caesar. In Jesus' time, you know this as well as I do, Rome was a superpower. They were run and led by the Caesars, all of which were pretty arrogant men, pretty full of themselves, One in particular, Caesar Augustus, was so full of himself that he actually claimed that he was sent by God as the Son of God to restore humanity to its intended glory. And so what would happen is anywhere that a town, a gathering, a city would acknowledge that to be true about Caesar, because everybody didn't. Some people were just like, yay, yes, that's who you are, Caesar. And then he'd leave and you're like, that guy's nuts. They're just giving him the credit because he had the power. But there were some people that were drinking the Kool-Aid and they thought, no, he is who he says he is. And to those people, they were given a designated name that indicated that they were set apart from people that didn't necessarily ascribe this level of deity to Caesar. They were called an ecclesia. They were called a church. A word that literally just means a set aside or a set apart assembly. And so it was to signify this is a group of people that they're set apart from any other people because of what they uniquely believe about Caesar. So enter Jesus. And Jesus begins to teach that he's in fact the Son of God. That he, in fact, came to creation to restore us to our intended glory. He begins to say many of the things that Caesar said were actually true about himself, but then he backs them up, not just with his teaching, with his miracles, then there's his death, then his resurrection. The church begins to grow and multiply. Even many of the powers that the disciples had early on were reflective of Jesus' power. They're healing, they're casting out demons, and so the church just begins to grow like wildfire and expand. And then all of a sudden, any group or gathering of men and women that believed, in fact, that Jesus was Lord began to be known as an ecclesia. They were called the church. I think part of what Jesus is trying to lay down here is something he's already been trying to explain with his disciples, and it's this. If you're going to take notes, this is actually your first fill in the blank. The church is not a place. It is a people. The church is a people. It's not a service. It's not a program. It's not an institution. It's not an organization. And it certainly isn't just brick and mortar. It's not a building. The church are the people of God who acknowledge Jesus Christ as Lord. That's the church. Because when he says, I've loved them to the end, I've completed something, it would be different if what he had completed was to start an organization. What would be different is if he completed a 501c3. What would be different is if he had this pyramid tiered down structure thing with services, and that's not what's happened. None of that's happened yet. That isn't even in existence. It's the furthest thing from anybody's mind. Because the disciples of Jesus are a remnant at best, and even with all of them together, which maybe was a few thousand that were kind of in and out of Jesus' moments of teaching, they are disliked, they have no respect, they are marginalized within their community. So the idea of this would have been completely foreign to them. This is not what they were thinking. This is not in the moment that Jesus says, I finished it. This is not necessarily what he was thinking of, which is what we usually ascribe church to, which is a building and a program and a service. The church is the people. Which is why, I know some of you are like, okay, 101, dude, I get that. Okay, but here's what's so crucial then. If the church is intended to be the people and not necessarily the program, then that means that everywhere the people of God are should be what the church should do. Because sometimes we have this mindset that here's what the church should do. Here's what the church should be. And when we think church, we think this thing separate from ourselves. It's more of an organization or a structure, an institution. But everything that we think and believe that the church should do and be is actually, in fact, what we should do and be as followers of Jesus. And so everywhere that the followers of Jesus are, whether you're here in a large gathering like this, whether you're in China in a living room in hiding, whether you're in Africa sitting under an acacia tree, there are certain distinct characteristics which should be true about the people of God. Things that should be what mark and define the ecclesia, the church, the set-apart people of God. There should be things that mark us and define us. We should not necessarily only be marked and defined by the things that organizationally we do or accomplish, but by who we are in our very character and behavior. And so I want to roll through a few things that happen at this table because I think they're significant in showing what some of those things, those characteristics, the marks of what we should be as followers are. So back to John John chapter 13, verse 2 says this. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So pause for just a minute. So here's an evening where Jesus knows everything that's coming. He knows the cross is in his near future. He knows, in fact, that one of the people sitting at the table, one of his closest followers, is going to betray him. And he also knows that everything in existence has been put under his power. Like, what do you do if you're in that moment and you've got everything under your power and you know horrible things are about to happen? How do you use your power in that moment? I mean, I get the right answer would be to be like Jesus, right? But we probably would use our power to get out of Dodge, right? Change Judas's mind. We go, I don't want to betray him all of a sudden. Like, Jedi mind trick on him or something. Or maybe you use your power to get out of what you're about to walk into somehow. But Jesus doesn't use his power that way at all. Like, have you ever been in a situation where you had maybe even just a little bit of power and it wasn't acknowledged? It was to no benefit? Like, years ago, the church that I started off at when I was a youth pastor, which if you don't know the church world, that's kind of like low into the totem pole. But we had just built this new, except for here. Crud. Come here. Let me just give you a hug. I love you, Jesse. It shouldn't be that way. But it was where I was at. And we had just built this beautiful new facility. And for silly reasons, we decided that you couldn't bring coffee into the auditorium. Worst mistake ever. I'm like, nobody wants to come to church without their coffee. And so we're like, you can't bring coffee in the auditorium. So we're a couple Sundays in. I'm like mad about this rule, begrudging. And there's this one day I noticed one of our pastors, Kevin, walk in. He's got coffee in his hand. And the greeter at the door is like, good morning. He goes in. He's like, hey, good morning. And, there's no missing it. I was like, okay. Well, I mean, he's the lead guy. I guess he gets the privilege. But then Scott Shawn comes in. He's the missions guy. I mean, he's higher on the totem pole than I was, but not much. And then I'm like, Scott comes in. He's like, good morning. Drinking his coffee. Guy's like, hey, good morning. I'm like, I guess the staff gets to bring in coffee. So I grabbed my coffee. And I come walking in. Guy stands right in front of me. He goes, you can't bring that in here. And I looked at him, part joking, and I said, clearly you don't know who I am. And he says, I don't care who you are. You're not bringing that coffee in this room. I was like, oh. I was trying to just use what little power I thought I had to get my coffee in the door. I couldn't even get that. Here's Jesus with everything under his power. And here's what he uses his power to do in that moment. So he got up from the meal and he took off his outer clothing and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus said, you don't realize now what I'm doing, but you will understand. No, Peter said, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. So then Simon said, well, not just my feet, but my hands and my head and everything as well. And Jesus answered him, those who have had a bath need only to have their feet washed. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him. He said this because not everyone was clean. So Jesus has this moment where you have to understand, like we read this, and especially if you have a church history, like this is so familiar. It's so easily normalized. Yeah, Jesus, he did that. That's one of the things he did. He washed the feet at the Last Supper. But you cannot overlook or mistake the fact that to the disciples, this would have been absolutely bizarre. Like this is where everybody stands back, and as he's like disrobing and toweling up, everyone's kind of whispering like, I think he done lost it. He did one too many miracles. How much wine did he have tonight? Like that's the kind of conversation happening because nothing about this makes sense. The foot washing makes sense. It's customary. This is what you do. I mean, when you traveled in this time, didn't matter how you traveled, chariot, horse, walking, everything made you dirty, especially walking. So it was customary. You go to somebody's house. One of the things that they do to welcome you is they wash your feet. They cleanse your feet. Again, weird to us. You never get your feet washed if you come to my house. But there are things that we do, right? You come over, what are some of the things that we do? Can I take your coat? Can I offer you something to drink? I think the drink thing is funny because it usually happens like right away. Like I'm not even in the door. People, can I get you something to drink? It's like, well, do I look parched? I have a faucet too. I'm good. Give me a minute. But it's just what we do. So much so that it's weird. If you go into someone's house and they never ask to take your coat, never offer you something to drink, is it weird? Yeah. Yeah, so there are things that we do that are also normal, they're customary. This was a normal custom, wash somebody's feet. Here's what's not normal is who's doing it. The host does not wash feet. This is the job of a servant or somebody lower on the totem pole. The one in charge doesn't wash feet. Jesus would have been completely within his right to look at anybody else in the room. Peter, John, Andrew. Nobody's feet have been washed yet. Come on, get to it. And probably nobody would have batted an eye. They're like, oh, yeah, because it's a rented room. This isn't somebody's home, so there's not a servant in the home. And so, yeah, I guess one of us have to do it. But instead, in this completely mind-boggling moment and move, Jesus gets up from the table, disrobes, towels up, gets on his knees, and the hands that once held universes now hold filthy feet and wash them. One of the things that must mark an ecclesia, any gathering of followers of Jesus Christ, is that we must be a people of posture, not position. In other words, we must be a people that embrace humility and service. Humility and service. The only one in that room that did not need to get down and wash feet was the only one that did. I don't know if you've ever been in a position where like you've kind of been found out being maybe a little bit full of yourself. I had years ago, I was hanging out with a new family. My wife had made this new friend. She's like, hey, babe, I think you're going to really like her husband. His name's Ryan, and I hear he snowboards. I was like, yeah, cool. Let's go hang out. They lived in the neighborhood, so we get together for dinner, and we're talking and hanging out. And I noticed that there's a picture in the front room of some snowboarder in the X Games, and I didn't recognize him. And I'm like, that's cool. I guess he really does dig snowboarding. So I had an experience about 4 years prior to that where my brother-in-law, he was friends with a photographer for the magazine Michigan Outdoors, and they were doing a photo shoot at Boyne Mountain, and they needed some people that they could just follow around because they were doing all the like new marketing, and they were like rebranding, and so all the stuff that was going to go online and in a magazine article. And so my brother-in-law was like, dude, I got a free weekend for you and anybody's you want. We're going to go up to Boyne, 3 days, they're paying for everything. I'm like, done. And you're going to be in a magazine at the end. I'm like, I'm there. So we show up, and we're like we're decent, but we're not amazing. We're not like magazine amazing by any means. And so this guy's following us around. I think it took him about an hour to realize these guys are they're just loafing off of my dollar. And so he starts following around this group of guys that are at the terrain park, just like killing it on all these tabletops. And so he just completely ignores us. So we end up with this picture. This is the only picture we were in. I don't even think it went in the magazine. I think it only lived online for a hot second, where we're like way in the background, where it's like, you can't even tell it's us. It's just like a little speck. I'm like, see that little speck? My wife's like, I think that's dirt on the cover. I'm like, no, that's me, actually. Because he's like zoomed in on this other guy doing a backflip or something. So I tell Ryan this story. I don't tell it that way. I'm like, yeah, so have you ever heard of Michigan Outdoors? He's like, no, man, I haven't. I'm like, well, it's a magazine here in Michigan. Because he had moved from Colorado. I'm like, and so they film all kinds, and they go everywhere, and it's all about the Michigan life. And yeah, a couple years ago, I was in their magazine, and so I'm like telling this whole dumb story, and my wife is like doing the knee thing under the table, like, stop. And I'm just going on. I'm like, I'm not being like really full of myself. I want to make sure this guy knows before we go snowboarding, like, I ain't no rookie. Like, we're going to go snowboarding. He better know what he's doing, so I want to keep up. So anyways, hours go by in the evening. It's getting to an end. And so I finally ask him, after having gone to the bathroom and walked down a hallway and seeing more pictures of this snowboarder, I'm like, I go, who is this guy? Clearly he's competing in what would have been the early X Games based on the pictures and the magazines that were framed. And I go to him, hey, Ryan, I've been curious all night. Like, who's that picture of all those snowboarders? And he goes, oh, that's me. And I go, oh. I totally didn't recognize it because in the picture he had all these like crazy dreadlocks. And I go, oh, that's you? He goes, yeah, I mean, it's no big deal. I was a part of helping start the X Games. Oh. I'm gonna go home now with my Michigan Out of Doors magazine. And it was so humiliating. But the whole night he's like, this is what he does. He's like, no, dude, like Michigan Out of Doors, like, no, man, that's awesome. You got a magazine. And he like totally talks me up. And at first I'm like, dude, this guy's just completely placating me. But then the more I got to know him and I hung out with him, that was just true to his character. He was a guy that would much rather push everybody else forward than to take the spotlight himself. He would much rather celebrate my ridiculous, minuscule Michigan Out of Doors than ever even bother to tell me that all of these magazines featured him and documentaries, and the list goes on. This is Jesus. He's the guy doing the backflips. He's in the hallway on all the photos and all the pictures, and yet what he does is he goes low. See, if we're to follow Jesus' example, like literally and genuinely follow his example, then the higher you are, the lower you should go. Whatever the status is that this world gives you. And some of you might say, I don't have much. Whatever the status is that this world gives you, whatever the position, whatever the power, whatever the influence, our job is to match it by going lower. I think part of what Jesus was intending to create with this community of people that would become called the church was not a program. It was not a Sunday morning service. It was a community of people who went low, whose posture meant more than position, who embodied what they saw in their Savior, which was one who was humble and served, even though he had every position under his authority to not have to do that. Part of what also happens at this table is in what Jesus does, not just to serve his disciples, but also where he sits. You go back to chapter 13 of John, this is what verse 18 says. He's just said that one's gonna betray them and turn on him, and he says this, I'm not referring to all of you. I know those I've chosen. So you gotta imagine a moment at the dinner table where he talked a minute ago about the fact that there's somebody here that's about to betray him, and everybody's not just murmuring now because he's got a towel on and washing feet, but now they're like, wait, what? Did he say betray? Like turn on him? And so he clarifies, I'm not referring to all of you. I know those I have chosen, but this is to fulfill the passage of scripture that says, he who shared my bread has turned against me. Now that's important. He who shared my bread is starting to give us indication of who's where at the table. Verse 19, I'm telling you now before it all happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. Because truly I tell you, whoever accepts anyone I send accepts me, and whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. After he had said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. And his disciples stared at one another at a loss as to which one he meant. One of them, the disciple whom he loved, this is John, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter mentioned to the disciple and asked which one he means. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is the one whom I will give this piece of bread to when I have dipped it in the dish. Then, dipping the piece of bread into the dish, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. And Jesus said to him, what you are about to do, do it quickly. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought that he was telling him to go buy what was needed for the festival or to give something to the poor. And as soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. The disciples, I love them, but man, are they thick. They're like, who's gonna betray you? He's like, the one who I give the bread to will betray me. Judas, here's the bread. And they're all like, I just don't get it. Who could it be? Do you think it's Andrew? Philip seems like a guy. Yes, they're like, come on, guys. But here's what's so important about the whole seating arrangement that has to be understood. This is Jesus. This is his evening. He called for this to happen. He asked the disciples to get the spot. He's in charge of the group. He didn't get sat where he didn't want to be. He chose where he sat. At no point was Jesus sitting next to Judas and went, man, how the heck did I get sat next to him? I wanted to be next to Peter. Like, this isn't happening. He chose to sit there. But there's some picture in this, like in our minds, that I don't know is entirely accurate. So most of us, if we think about the Last Supper, you probably think of a picture that we've all seen before that was painted in the 1490s by Leonardo da Vinci. Here's what it is. The problem is it's not entirely accurate to the setting that would have been true to this culture in this era. So it's a raised table. Not the case. It would look something much more like this, a table low to the ground, not this typical raise where we put ourselves in seats. Here's what's also inaccurate about the picture. If you name the disciples that are at the table based on how he painted them, go to the next picture, it has Judas, you can see over here to the left, several people removed from Jesus. But we know that where Jesus would have been sitting, according to the way the text came, is John turned to him and asked him, who's it going to be? And he says, the one who dips into the same cup I do, that he would have been flanked by both John and Judas. So here's what the scene would have better looked like in terms of like table and structure on the floor here, but also here's a picture of it. So lower to the ground, they would have been sitting either maybe on a cushion, some kind of a comfortable, more padded surface, but definitely more ground level. And then here would have been a better representation of the arrangement at the table. And I just think this is important because I want you to get a picture of part of what happened. So, hey, Matthias, you there? Can you help? So just to get a visual, because when you're sitting, I don't know why your walk out just made some people giggle, but it did. I just want you to take note of that. Sit down. So you're going to be sitting at tables. I met John. You know, of course, I picked the role of Jesus here, but I'm just going to do it for example. You got John.
That makes me.
That makes you.
Cool.
Judas.
Cool.
So if there's anything actually that's happened between you and I, this is a really awkward moment. You need to confess. I'm here. Okay. We're good. So there's no seat back. There's no chair. So after a while, I mean, your back just gets like, where do I go? So do you know part of what you do when you're sitting at a table like this is you actually, at points or another, you utilize each other to rest. And knowing what hand you would have eaten with and knowing how you would have rested, maybe Jesus shared both shoulders. But there's definitely a moment where as you and I are sharing, go on, we're dipping in to the same cup. Like, we're pretty close together. That's you would not make it in Hollywood, dude. Come on, man. Where's your cup acting? Yeah, it's right here. See it? Okay.
Way over here.
Yeah, there you go. There's an undeniable closeness between us where here's what you just can't miss. Jesus is not here next to the betrayer by accident or out of regret. He's here out of intentional purpose to sit himself next to and even at times perhaps lean on the very person who within hours will hand him over to be crucified. You know what else the church has to be? Doesn't matter what the gathering is, where it is, how big it is. It has to be a group of messy, imperfect people, but a gracious group. It is a group where we are invited to come with all of our mess. Because, I mean, think about it. All around this table is a mess of men being made into disciples. You got Peter, who's a hothead. He's probably somewhere over there, constantly just arrogant, ignorant, not listening, combative with Jesus. You got Andrew, who fled at the arrest. You've got James and John, who have been nicknamed the sons of thunder. This isn't an affectionate term. It's because they had a tendency to think that their problems could be solved with aggression. I mean, for all of them, there's issues of arrogance, self-centeredness, self-righteousness. There's issues of hard-heartedness. There's lack of listening to Jesus. I mean, there's all kinds of issues. I would contend that many, if not all, of the disciples at this table probably wouldn't make the cut in some of our leadership circles in the churches today. And yet they were the very men that Jesus had sit at his table. If there was a spot for all of them to come, and especially Judas, then you better believe there's a spot for you and I. And that means we need to make a spot for everybody as well. Let me give you one more. Thanks, dude. Let me wrap this up. I'll give it to you, and then I'll explain it very briefly. The church also has to be a place not just of gracious, messy, imperfect people gathered together, but it also has to be a place of changing people. The church has to be a place of changing people. Probably nobody knows the change that God can do in someone's life better than the Apostle Paul in the Bible. Paul, who I'm sure a lot of you know his story, but if you don't, he was not pro-Jesus. He hated Jesus, thought he was a heretic. Even after his resurrection, he was going to squash this growing movement called Christianity. On the way to do that, he has this supernatural encounter with God, changes his whole life, changes his trajectory. He goes from literally somebody who was killing Christians to somebody who didn't just become one. He became probably the most significant one in the New Testament because of all the churches that were started under his care and under his watch. So this is a guy, when he writes about any form of change, he writes with an authority that most would not. And this is part of what Paul says. Book of Ephesians, he writes to one of the churches in Ephesus that he was a part of starting and says, chapter 4, verse 17, "So I tell you this, and I insist on this in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in their futility of thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separate from the life that God has for them because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have been given themselves over to sensuality so that as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you learned. When you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, and to be made new in attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness." Part of what has to happen in the gathering of the church is a place where we experience absolute sense of radical belonging. Like, come, be a part. We want to sit with you. We want to journey with you. That there is no thing that makes us say, find somewhere else. At the same time, it must be an unprecedented place of transformation. But you cannot have the transformation without the belonging. These men were ultimately transformed because Jesus kept bringing them in and challenging them to grow, but kept bringing them in. It has to be a place of belonging, but it must also be a place of transformation. Like, if you don't have the belonging, you won't have the transformation. Like, I've never talked to anybody that's a brand new parent. A couple months in, I'm like, hey, so how's it going? And they're like, well, to be honest with you, I can't stand the thing. All it does is poop and eat and sleep and then repeat. And I mean, it costs way more money than I thought it was going to cost to do this parenting thing. And it's been almost a year and it still doesn't have a job. Never happened, right? Because we expect infants to be infants. But if that thing grows up to be 38 years old and all that's still true, you got a problem on your hands. Right? This is where we get it wrong sometimes, is that sometimes in the church we can go one of two extremes. We can either go to the extreme of we expect the infant to act like they're 38 years old. Like, that was a church I grew up in. If you walk through the doors, you better get it. You better act right. You better behave right. You better look like Jesus. Do you know how many people turn around and walk very quickly right back out those doors because the message was there's no place for you here? At the same time, here's where we can get it wrong the other direction. Come, sit forever. Never change. This is when we love the grace of Jesus but reject the change of Jesus. And here's what this is not for me for a moment, is it's not me saying, just go be a better person. Go stop doing your things. It is saying if you want to experience and taste the richness and the extent of life with and for Jesus, that cannot happen if you embrace his grace and reject his change. The church must be a place of absolute radical belonging, but unprecedented changing and transformation at the same time. Around this table, this is a significant moment that will create everything that God intends his church to become in character and display and in ethos. And at one point, Jesus sits with his disciples. And before they're done, he has what we've turned into the moment of communion when he just takes literally the elements at hand. He's got bread, he's got wine. And he begins to talk about them in reference to, again, they don't get it entirely, but in reference to himself. Matthew chapter 26, it says, while they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup that he had given to them, and he gave thanks, saying, drink it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. And I tell you, I will not drink from the fruit of this vine again from now on until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. I love this because he's commemorating this moment that for 2,000 plus years now, the church has followed in the footsteps of this moment, celebrating not just that dinner, but celebrating the cross that would come. Disciples didn't get it. We do now. Celebrating the cross that was to come. But then he says this, hey, when I'm done eating with you, I actually won't share another glass of wine with you until we do it in eternity. What's so powerful is that what he instituted at that table will also one day culminate at a table in eternity called the Feast of the Lamb. When again, Jesus will grab his cup for the first time since then and say, we dine again. This dinner table, though, was where Jesus created the moment that would become the church, that would become his method in humanity to say to all the world, you are welcome to come and experience my change. It's the invitation to come, and it's the power to change. So we thought it would be fitting then to end this morning also with the Lord's Supper, with communion. And so this morning, sometimes we have it scattered throughout the room. Today we have it just in two places. We have it right up front, but this is like set up so you can go on the back side and the front side. So I would just invite you. Matthias is going to lead us. The band's going to lead us. So when you're ready, maybe you go right away. Maybe you take a minute and take this next song. But as you're ready this morning, we just want to celebrate what it was that Jesus did to make us who he intends us to be as his church, as his ecclesia, as his set-apart people. Father, thank you for your goodness, your grace, your truth, your Holy Spirit to make sense of all of it. So I pray you do that now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Prophet, some say a priest come back to life. You keep asking, but who do you say I am? The Christ, the King, the living, breathing God, the light, the way, Messiah, God with how great the revelation to see you as you are, the Christ, the King,
So next week kicks off the series that's going to lead us right into Christmas. So here's what I would encourage you to be thinking about starting now, if you haven't yet, is who needs the invite from you? And it's not just the invite to Kensington. It's not just the invite to Christmas. It's ultimately the invite to the table. It's the invite to come and see this Jesus who, full of grace and mercy, changes and transforms everything. We got a prayer team that's going to be up here at the front, also in the lobby. If we can pray for you, serve you before you go today, listen to you in any way, let us do that. Otherwise, thanks for being with us this morning. We'll be excited to do it again next week. Have a great week.
Mm-hmm.